Okay, class. My audiovisual assignment is a critique on Elisabeth Schussler Fiorenza's theological perspective. At the time of this assignment, I have not read any of her books. I am familiar with her scholarly publications, which I have been referred to from citations in feminist criticism articles and books. I do find merit in much of the content by authors of feminist criticism literature. Dr. Elisabeth Schussler Fiorenza's feminism does not represent all feminist critical views on biblical literature. At the time of Hayes' publication of this text, which is 1996, there has been no major publication to his knowledge of New Testament ethics from a feminist perspective. Elisabeth Fiorenza's life's work was to formulate and advocate a form criticism with her own feminist style. Fiorenza's feminism was not without its feminist rivals among biblical scholars. For example, neo-orthodoxy, feminist criticism, and womanist criticism. Fiorenza's consideration of evidence of biblical feminist oppression from Richard Hayes' portrait appears to be too general. She did not distinguish nuances of divine sanctioned patriarchal leadership and the absence, rarity, or obscurity of female authors of biblical books, the editing or redacting of texts over millennia, to name a few. One major subject Fiorenza examines concerning gender equality was the stature of women among Galileans or Nazarenes, and its difference from Christian communities, while Fiorenza explains the reason, concluding it was a major sociological dichotomy when she said this movement was not structured according to Greco-Roman patriarchal household, their static, spiritual-led worship, signaled all members were full of Sophia, Hokmah, or wisdom and spirit. Fiorenza accuses Saul of ambivalence or betraying women in the Galileans Hellenistic mission, as if he journeyed to the Greek lands looking for Greeks to convert. But may I digress? The pastoral letters of Paul, she mentioned as gyno-oppressive, were all among the pseudo-Pauline genre, a body of writings which features the questionable editing. She does acknowledge the rise of the bishops and Christian institutional structure as a patriarchal deviation from the Galileans or early church. It is not known at this time of this project if Fiorenza considered Ignatius of Antioch's mission to discard Galilean or Judean customs as a defining moment in a revival of Greco-Roman ethics among Christians of the early 2nd century Common Era. Back to the pseudo-Pauline epistles. Fiorenza appears to be protecting the ante-Nicene church fathers by not criticizing the Hellenist bishops for abolishing the Galilean social egalitarianism to accommodate the Greco-Roman praxis. These Christian reforms which favored Greco-Roman patriarchy accompanied other reforms which the ante-Nicene fathers who dissented from the apostolic Judaism regarded them as heretical. According to Schussler Fiorenza, patriarchy has infected the whole history and tradition of Christianity to such a degree that women must, at least for a time, form their own communities in which they can reclaim their spiritual identity. While this may be a worthwhile solution, Fiorenza neglected the examination of the patriarchal structures of rabbinic Judaism to which Christianity has heavily borrowed. For example, oral traditions, canonical texts, weekly service liturgy, androcentric, gynophobic schools. In comparable amounts, it has borrowed from Hellenism, which ignores the uniqueness of the egalitarianism by the Galilean followers of Jesus. So many features of the editorial traditions of Israel's literature are in need of greater scrutiny. Hopefully, more scholars become willing to participate in the process of questioning the absence of female prophets' texts. But literacy was not low among Israelite women. Women in Levitical families attached to the tent of meeting and the temple music services, and library work such as Huldah the Prophetess, see 2 Kings 22 verse 14 and 2 Chronicles 34 verse 22. The exclusion and marginalization of Israelite women from literary preservation does reveal a weakness in the culture. The Book of Ruth does not preserve the first-hand testimony of the narrative. Recorded prayers uttered by women are few and rich in the rich Israelite prophetic culture. Feminist criticism has a lot of work cut out for them because the androsphere has created plenty of opportunities for their critical analysis. Hayes characterizes Fiorenza's translation of the term ecclesia differently from traditional Christian rendering as misleading. Hayes' attachment to the tradition and guarding of its continuity is well understood. On a historical note, William Tyndale, the first English language Bible translator, was murdered by Bloody Mary, Queen of Scots, for dissenting from the translation traditionally approved by monarchs and clergy. The anachronistic use of certain terms such as Christian, Jew, and church are not specific contentions Hayes and others may have with feminists or any other form of liberation criticism, but with the break with tradition within the Christianity. Hayes also stands in opposition to Fiorenza's notion of women's congregation as a symbol of protest for liberation against patristic Christian violence against women. She proposes women need to be separated from the internalized misogyny. Hayes' recall of Fiorenza's radical ideas on women church and embracing the angry power of the Spirit while rejecting passivity and acquiescence in suffering are commonplace when victims of oppression take corrective measures to empower themselves. Fiorenza fell short on the issue of radical feminist hermeneutics by acquiescing to denouncing violence. The church endorsed violence and carried it out directly against heretics and whomever they chose. She failed by allowing herself to be interrogated on the matter of resistance to male violence against women, which may have saved her teaching career. In that case, she went too far pretending she was radical. Thank you for listening to my audio video assignment on critique on Elisabeth Fiorenza, feminist biblical criticism. Thank you and have a good night.